That's what it is. Christopher, what do you do? How are we connected?
Well, Nick, we were connected by working at the same TV station, I guess, several years ago in Green Bay.
It's weird that you're asking me. Like, Christopher used to do live shots outside of my apartment. I've been on this pilgrimage to convince everyone that I know about the values of QR. Megan is doing the same sort of thing with her group of people. And I think we connected, Christopher, before I'd come to Flow Code, but we started doing some spec ad work to just test out the Green Bay market. How much of that are you willing to, comfortable, want to talk about?
So I just started thinking about dabbling in QR codes because I was creatively struggling to relay a bunch of information for a specific client. And so I got this text from Nick out of the blue and I said, this is literally perfect timing. So we threw one up for the client, and lo and behold, it was a perfect way to relate the information that I had been struggling to relate because it was a ton, and it worked.
What was it that like blew your mind about it? Like, did you have a moment of running that first test where you were like, holy crap, I think we're onto something? And what was it that made you feel that way?
I think it's a word that you guys probably aren't used to hearing when interviewing and talking about QR codes, but it's affirmation. That I have been pounding the table for years saying TV is not dead, because I knew when we dabbled in every tactic at my fingertips, whenever we added or took away from the TV, it did not work as well. So I always knew, well, that and the introduction of ComScore, where you actually knew how many people were actually watching your station, right? But
you have an idea about the number of people who are watching your thing, but continue.
A mild suggestion, but
it's better than filling out a name, right?
I agree with that.
Anyways, it was a complete affirmation of wow, not only are people watching, but it's pretty cool to see them being interactive with something that's been around since the 50s.
The TV.
The TV.
Because for a second I was like, does he think QR codes have been around since the 50s? That would be bonkers.
What would they look like now, I wonder? They'd probably all look like flow codes, to be honest. The QR of the future.
There you go.
If we go 50 years into the future from right now.
Great Scott, Nick.
I got, these aren't my Back to the Future shoes, but a little bit.
I like those, though. You wore those in New York.
Yeah. Pretty cool.
That's when I knew that Nick was super fly.
That's what I'm known for, flyness.
So to in summary, Megan, to answer your question, it wasn't like a, oh, wow, blow my mind moment. It was like, I knew it.
Yeah, like there it is. Mm-hmm.
Yep.
Well, I think that was like, I mean, so I was lucky enough. My first experience with Flow Code was as a client, and kind of the same thing. It was like, well, how do I get more of these eyeballs that I know are watching on TV to like our website? You know, I wanted to like connect the dots there. And, you know, I mean, you're not wrong. It's like, there's something really interesting about making that TV audience that, you know, everybody knows is there. Everybody knows is valuable enough to spend money on it. And then suddenly you're like completely, like you said, just like validating the fact that those eyeballs are there, that those are real people. And, you know, it takes the idea of TV measurement kind of in a different direction. It's more than just a mild suggestion of your audience. And now suddenly you have real live humans on the other side.
Tell them how much money you made on Flow Code. Not the dollar amount, just.
Yeah, I mean, it was a crap load of incremental revenue. I mean, that's honestly because, you know, what we started seeing was like, you know, working it into sales content was easy enough because every advertiser wants an attribution solution anyway. And everybody like, so in Chicago, there were a bunch of like kind of buzzworthy attribution tools making the rounds. And it was like a couple of years of people asking for things like beep that out if we don't want to. I don't know if we do that.
I'll beep it out for sure.
Okay. So like Analytic Owl is out there and all of this, and suddenly all of these agencies and clients were like, well, what do you have like in terms of measurement? Everybody got really spoiled with digital metrics, and then like demanded the same kind of transparency on TV. So we were like, well, let's use like QR as an attribution solution. And so not only were we, you're charging for the media that it's running in, but then you're charging for the code and then a landing page and then retargeting and all of these things. And suddenly we're selling like really smart media campaigns that both prove the attribution side, but then also are like proving like measurable results, giving us the ability to generate first party data. And it was like, by the time we were able, by the time I left, we had been working with Flowcode for like 6 months. And it was like 5 figures per month in like new revenue that was directly tied to the Flowcode, because it suddenly validated all of the advertising we had. And it tied together everything that was cross-platform. So like, it was a data story that, as sales managers, as account executives, we were like, oh my gosh, we delivered X number of TV eyeballs and X number of those scanned. And then suddenly you have conversion rates against like all of these things that you're promoting on TV, and you have the message delivery to conversion all in one neat little package. And it was like one of those things. I was like, why haven't we been doing this all along? It made TV clickable. And that's it. I mean, it's so simple. I'm almost mad about it.
I like that. That's a good tagline. Making TV clickable.
It's easy, right? I mean, because that's really all it is. It's a link click, and you put the QR on anything that you want to click, and boom.
So
It's so simple.
So Megan, you're telling me that if Brian Hodgkiss came to you, he's a lawyer. He said, I want to put up my spot, 920-222-2222. I just want my number to be up the whole time because I need people to know how to call me. Would you do that spot in Green Bay? Christopher, I don't know if this is your client, but I just went through Green Bay's airtime and found Brian Hodgkiss running ads at 11:30 in the morning.
Not my client, but I'm familiar.
Okay, so you can go give this to whoever the sales agent is who reps Brian Hodgkiss. But like, we've seen success in people saying, hey, I'm a lawyer and I'm a really good lawyer. I hope you never need to call me. But if you do need to call me, scan this code right now. My phone number is going to be in your phone. And if you have an accident, you need a lawyer, I'm right there. If you have, legal need and whatever it is, but no matter what, you've got my number and I'm in your phone. How much extra would you charge for that, Megan, percentage-wise, and why?
Well, I don't know. And this is where I need to rely on you guys, because it's all about like differentiators, right? Like, why use us over somebody else, or, for whatever reason. But we do a lot of free production as a differentiator, as a loss leader. Okay. And we used to treat it like, old cell phone companies used to actually give free phones away, right? Loss leaders.
Yeah.
So I don't know. I would like an answer maybe from you guys, because I don't know I believe 100% this is the future, but how do I justify charging for this when somebody could, somebody down the street can be like, oh, I'll just do it for you for free.
You mean do it for free, like put a QR code on their spot and give them the analytics?
Yeah.
So we end up in that question a lot. What is different between you guys and a code that I can go download for free and then you get some sort of action? Go.
Right.
So here's the thing, like, we all see that like QR boils down to that basic functionality of making things clickable. But we also know that like you should never interact with a link or a QR code or anything like that you don't know what the destination is. I mean, the FBI released that bulletin like 3 weeks ago where they were like, don't scan QR codes if you don't know where they're going, because they might get you. And like, that's true. That's a real thing. If it's not secure, and if it's a QR code that you just generated off of some random generator on the internet, you don't necessarily know like what are the privacy policies on the back end. Is your data being stolen and resold every time you scan that code? There's a lot of kind of liability there. But the thing that's kind of interesting about flow code is that we're so pro viewer and pro creator that we basically built our brand and the idea of having really secure, very private one-to-one connections between the consumer and the brand, or the consumer and the content producer, whoever that is. So, when you talk about differentiators, you could look at flow code, and every single code that we have has our privacy policy literally just built into the bottom of the code. So you kind of go into it with the understanding that it's a data safe and brand safe environment. Flow code does not capture any data unless it's like CRM data that somebody is volunteering, which then only belongs to the publisher or the brand, which is super, super exciting because, a lot of the marketing, as a lot of the marketing that we've kind of been exposed to as consumers over the last 10 years has been very much based on data we were having stolen from us that we didn't even realize was happening, right? And so like we weren't picking and choosing what we were interacting with. It was kind of being force fed. And now here we are with the ability to kind of pick and choose what we want. And every time you scan a flow code, you kind of know that it's a safe and direct experience, which is wonderful. We kind of solve for the idea of not knowing where it's going or not knowing what it's for, because all of our codes are completely like branded, fully designed, and really kind of are meant to be more of like a content experience than they are just a scan. You know what I mean? So it's, that's right off the top. Those are like the two like big visual differences just from the code itself. But then, we could go, and here's the thing, Nick knows, because we're on these calls together all the time. I could talk about it for freaking forever. Like, what are all the differences? We could talk about the codes and the landing pages and the data capabilities and the animations and the people that we have. Like, there are so many things that set flow code apart that like it's almost like I wouldn't even put us in the same category as like most QR providers.
So,
Well, with those answers, I would happily justify a cost for that.
and that's part of it. Like, you have to build out, why this is different. But the other side of it, why doesn't he just go get a free code? Like, you guys have a FCC license to broadcast, right?
Right.
The idea that a disgruntled employee at the gas station that's advertising, the lawyer office that's advertising, you pick whichever major advertiser you have, one person has the ability to change the link on a dynamic code, and suddenly your FCC license is linking people directly to something that you don't want them to link to from your broadcast product. It's kind of like quality control. I'm a believer, even if it's not flow code, every station should be guarding against anything that they don't get the analytics back on, because I would want to know, if I was the GM at a station in Green Bay, I would want to know that my new methodology of making money against, advertising and serving my people better is not unsafe, and that I get all the analytics in the end. Like, as the GM, I would want to know, okay, we've got this client commercial that Christopher's running and it's doing well. Cool. Spikes are coming up in my analytics that I didn't have before. Wait, let's put in that lawyer commercial. And now let's give away the weather app. And now you start going to all these things. I promise you guys have some sort of promotion on the air right now saying, hey, send us your pictures of the winter, deer season, the new snow, weather, like whichever one it is. You've got one of those promos. I promise you. You could put up a QR code, and
every station in America has one of those.
They do, but you can
winter.
triple the amount of people who are submitting that stuff by removing the barrier from them wanting to do it, and then being able to do it by putting a QR code on the air. This is coming up real salesy.
One thing that I don't want to call it a hesitation, but one thing that I'm worried about going forward with QR codes, right, is perfect example. My coworker saw my client have one, and she's like, oh, my client wants one too. And I'm like, well, it's really working for us because there's something for us to tell. Okay. So there's a ton of information I can't get across in 30 seconds. And she's like, well, I'm just going to put one up there. And I'm like, well, what are you telling somebody? You're just putting it on there for no reason? She's like, yep. And I'm like, well, I'm afraid that we're going to desensitize people to QR codes because of the fact that people are going to put them up there for no reason.
I don't think that's a crazy thought to have, but as I've had that conversation with people too, you guys have websites up that no one's going to. You have, I should say, you have advertisers who insist on putting their website there, but their website doesn't really help their business. They just know that they want some sort of metric. So I think it's never going to hurt that the QR code is there, and not being there only means that whatever you're trying to get someone to do takes a little bit longer for them to do it.
I guess I didn't want to come across negative. What I meant is that we as content providers and message specialists, we need to come up with a better way to use them. So it's not just throwing them up. We need to be better to make sure that we are really attracting the viewer to use them properly.
Right. Because ultimately the QR isn't the thing people are interacting with. That's just the method. It's the message that they're responding to, right? So that's often the conversation, and it's very relevant right now based on some things that Nick and I were talking about earlier. But the idea of like, there's a level of like transparency and like vulnerability there, isn't there, as a content creator, where you're like, how much of my ego am I going to take out of this because we're suddenly able to see when the message resonates and when it doesn't. And you can go back to an ad, like, so I think about this from an advertising perspective. You go back to an advertiser and you're like, look, that call to action didn't work. Let's try this again. And it's the same kind of approach that we take to optimizing with digital, right? You have the message, fairly early on whether or not people are responding to it, and then you can change the message accordingly. And now suddenly you have the method of really tracking the response, but there's more emphasis put on what that actual message is. Otherwise, nobody's going to respond to it. So it's really interesting. Like, call to action is everything, creative is everything. And I think there's a new focus on content creators and brands having to earn that interaction versus forcing it.
Agreed.
I with great power comes great responsibility.
Yes.
So let's go back. So that's the perfect ending, but we need to say, I don't know if you ever saw Avengers Infinity War, Megan, but
Sorry.
I got me and I'm going to spoil part of it for you right now. I got out of it. I was in Florida. I texted Christopher, oh my gosh, Infinity War, amazing. And he's like, yeah, or something. And I said, I can't believe they killed Spider-Man. He hadn't seen it yet. And I was like,
you're a menace.
So, but I didn't know that he hadn't seen. I thought we were texting because he had saw it. But anyway, I didn't have to make, I felt I needed to make a public apology, and I put it out, and I apologized to Christopher for ruining one of the greatest cinematic events he could have experienced, but now can't. And then after every Marvel movie I go to now, I just text him and say it's Spider-Man time. But
we usually saw everything at the midnight release.
Yeah.
Always. And my kids are just slightly older than Nick's kids. So we had just started going to movies with my kids. So it's not like I could have taken them to a midnight release, and Nick didn't know that. So
I went to episode 1 when I was in 8th grade at midnight.
Wow.
This is a perfect place to end this. Chris,
and Nick is now 12.